the body filler on, we let it dry for a little bit. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to use some 36 on a block. I'm going to block this out. It's not fully dry yet, but it's in the process of drying. If you can catch it at the right time, it's a lot easier to sand. You can kind of level it out and knock some of the highs down when it's like this. So I'll go ahead and sand it. And if you sand too early, you're going to peel it. It's going to kind of start peeling from the metal. And of course, if you're too late, it's going to be fully hardened and just be a little bit harder to sand. And you don't want to try to sand all the way down to the surface whenever you're doing this method. This just kind of level it out a little bit just to eliminate some of the blocks. I'm just lightly going over it. I really don't want to get 36 scratches all out here. So you notice how fast it's sanding off. Yeah, it's starting to feel pretty level. Feels good. A little bit right here. Get it missing a little bit. Okay, now that's all I want to sand right now. I want to go ahead and let it fully dry, and then I'll finish sanding it out. I'll switch to 80 grit and get rid of these 36 grit scratches, and then we'll talk about applying some putty. And 3M now makes putty, glazing putty with the same system. It's pretty new. This is the body filler that we have right here, and then there's a glazing putty for it. And they've also came up with a fiberglass filler, and that's used for any time you weld something. You have to put fiberglass on first because it seals really good. Body filler doesn't really seal that good. But anyway, we'll talk about that later, and we'll finish getting this sanded with some 80 grit after it dries, finish drying a little longer, and then we'll be ready for the glaze. Okay, now I've allowed it to dry a little bit longer, and now it's fully hardened. So I'm going to go ahead and finish sanding this out. I'm going to hit a little bit more 36, and then I'll switch to 80. You can notice how much more it's a little harder to sand, and it's more of a powder now that it's drier. We'll be sure to cross sand to keep from falling in contouring. Okay, that's starting to feel pretty level, so I'm going to go ahead and switch to some 80 grit here. All right, now I've got 80 grit on my block. I'm going to finish sanding it. Especially on your edges, be sure and cross in a lot. That helps feather it in without undercutting it. Sometimes I'll even sand in circles, back and forth. It's very important to keep your block flat in order to get a level surface. I do got a little bit of body filler on the paint here. I did overlap. So be sure that you do get that sanded off. You'll notice we got some metal showing here. Sometimes that could indicate a high. In this case, it's not. But sometimes if you get metal showing, feel of it. If it is a high, you can take your hammer and lightly you can tap it down. And I'm not going to do it right now because I don't think that it needs that, but you could lightly tap it down. Now from this point, you got a couple of options. You could put some guide coat on here and go ahead and finish this off with 150 grit sandpaper.